out there. This is Toy Customizer Wakeangel2K1 bringing you something that I found at a National Wholesale Liquidators for the bargain price of $6. Yes, apparently Wholesale Liquidators has got Thundercats toys in, along with some Halo 4 figures, which is weird to me because we still sell Halo 4 figures at Toys R Us. But it is the new Thundercats series Lino. Lino is packaged in this blister pack, which is collector friendly in that you can simply cut through the tape on the back and have an openable and resealable package. See, just like that. So let's get him out of the packaging and do a proper review of the figure inside. So here is Lino out of the packaging. So let's quickly go over the notable flaws that prevented this from being a major collector's figure as Bandai of America intended. First, the joints. As you can see, his joints are held together with this black plastic, which really clashes with the figure's normal color scheme. And it's really not that bad, but I imagine to people that are used to collecting things like Figma or you know, stuff like that, it could be a real turn-off. Also, when you look at the face, the paint job on the face seems a little bit soft. Like there's focus, yes. Like there's no real hard lines there, and you know, compared to how sharp the sculpt on the rest of the figure is, the face looks a little bit soft because of that paint job. Alright, but other than that, those are the only notable flaws on the figure, and otherwise it is extremely well implemented. Let's talk about his articulation. His head, there's a swivel here that allows it to turn, and a swivel here that allows him to look down. His shoulders can go outwards and forwards, and he has a very nice bicep swivel. Double jointed elbows, which gets you quite a range for an elbow. He has a wrist swivel here, hidden in the sculpt of his forearm fur, and a little wrist joint here that allows his hand some movement, which helps in wielding the sword. On his right shoulder, that shoulder pad is made out of a flexible material and moves around in its own connection point, so his arm articulation isn't really hindered by it. That's very good. He has torso joints. He has a wiggling side-to-side movement here, and a little bit of an ab crunch, not much, and a waist joint. And below the waist, he has hips, which are not really restricted by the flexible skirt armor. A thigh swivel below those hips. A double jointed knee that gets a really deep bend, and an ankle joint which goes forward and backwards and tilt inwards and outwards, allowing for wide-legged stances if you so desire. I mean, not quite as wide as Chitara's, but still pretty wide. Looking at him from the back, something that when I mentioned when I was doing a review of classic style Lino, I mentioned how horrible all these screw holes looked. And yeah, it seems that modern style Lino is guilty of the same crime. There had to be a way to cover up all these screw holes. Although since his sculpt is overall darker, his color scheme that is, it can be a little bit harder to notice the screws. So that's something at least. Although, if we look back here, we can see that he actually has fur sculpted in the back of his calves, which is a really nice touch, really. I mean, you gotta remember that Lino is actually, you know, an anthropomorphized cat, so him having signs of actual fur, and not just, you know, coloring his skin in fur-like colors, is actually a really nice touch. For a quick comparison, let's bring in Chitara. Her articulation isn't quite as good as Lino's. I'm guessing that was a choice to sacrifice a little bit of her articulation to preserve her sculpt. But if you look on her back, if I twist her hair out of the way, she doesn't have any screw holes. It seems somewhat strange to me that the figure with less robust articulation actually completely lacks the screw holes that really mar the sculpt of the Lionel figure. Alright, so let's talk about accessories. Unlike Chitara, who came only with her staff, or Lionel, classic Lionel, who came with a bunch of hands, this version of Lionel comes with a battle-ready Sword of Omens, a little dagger-sized Sword of Omens for its non-combat form, a claw shield, which also functions as an alternate hand. I'll show you that in a minute. And the claw sheath as it hangs on his hip. As you can see, there is a slot inside the claw sheath, which the smaller version of the Sword of Omens slots right into. Although it would be kind of cool if this was painted red so it looked like the hilt of the sword, but you know, it looks fine. Let's show you how these things attach to the Lionel figure. Alright, so let's zoom in a little bit to this little black thing on Lionel's hip armor. There is a little ball at the end, and it's meant for you to slide the claw sheath onto it like this. Like that. Yeah. It goes in with a nice satisfying popping noise. And although his arm can't sit as close to his body now because that's in the way, it actually looks pretty good there. It looks just like the claw sheath in the show. It's a little bit articulated so it can get a bit out of the way. You can even get Lionel to rest his hand on the hilt of it. The sword, that is. And since this is attached to the armor, you can actually splay Lionel's legs apart without it coming off. If I were to compare it to the same thing that's on the classic Lionel figure, remember, separating his legs means popping the thing right the heck off. So this is actually another one of those instances where the modern figure is better engineered than the classic one. Although that could be, you know, because of this whole onesie affair that he wears doesn't have as many moving parts. Just for comparison's sake, here are the two versions of the Sword of Omens. This is the modern cartoon version, and this is the classic version. As you can see, the modern cartoon version is a little bit shorter, but it seems to have more detail painted in the eye. You know, there's a black outline placed around the yellow part, while the classic version is just yellow painted onto a red circle. You can also see differences in the design of the hilt and the guard, but really that's not that one is better than the other. They're both accurate to the cartoons that they were in. So, you know, nothing wrong there. The awakened version of the Sword of Omens is they're kind of long, but as you can see, the classic sword is significantly longer than the modern one. In fact, the modern one, if you've lined a tip up with the Eye of Thundera, then the tip of the classic sword is almost reaching the end of its hilt. So, can I zoom out here to show these? Yes. So these very long swords, the classic one is a bit longer, and but don't think that there's anything different because they're both made out of floppy material. But you know what? This version actually is a slightly less floppy. Yet this is the toy that was supposed to be caught onto by all the kids of the era, and although it's still rubbery, it does a better job at retaining its shape than this one, which was trying to get adult collectors. I really don't know what's wrong with Bandai of America. I really don't. The last accessory is the version of the claw sheath that has fingers on it. Now, unlike the 4-inch Lionel figure where it's a big piece of clip-on armor, on this one it's more of a swapping hand. So you gotta pull Lionel's ordinary hand off, and you can see it still has this little articulated joint there. And then you slip this onto the connection. See, there's a hole inside, which I'm not sure is showing up on the camera very well. See? Now, the thing is, this can be kind of hard to put on. So I'm going to do it off camera because otherwise you'll just be seeing me struggling with this forearm. I think if this plastic here on the forearm nub was a little bit harder, then it would go into the claw sheath easier. But as it is, it takes quite a bit of forcing. And one time I actually had to stick this guy in a freezer to harden that peg up enough. So let's just put it on off camera. And there is Lionel wearing the claw sheath in its gauntlet form. It fits on there very nicely, and because of the deep elbow bend, he can actually look pretty cool. The Sword of Omens, the small version, still fits in here, just like that. And I think his articulation is just barely good enough that you can just about have a pose where it looks like he is reaching over to pull out the sword. It's, yeah, just like that. Yeah. I mean, it's not the best, but it's not bad. It pulls the look off. And then you can yank it out. Yeah. Oh, and speaking of holding the Sword of Omens, as you can see, the Sword of Omens actually sits a lot better in this version of Lionel's hand than it does in the classic Lionel's hand. Mostly because the hilt isn't so thick and the holding thing isn't so small. It's actually more like this and not like this. Although the hand swap is a little bit more difficult because on here it's some kind of mushroom peg affair, while on classic Lionel it's a very simple ball joint. Alright, so the only thing left to do is to show you how Lionel wields the Awakened Sword of Omens. You just have to stick it in his holding thing hand, just like this. And Lionel is ready to cut down some mutants and defend the Thundercats and all that. Oh, sorry, not mutants. Mutants is what they called them in the old show. Lizards, mostly. Most of their enemies are lizards. And, you know, another success, since he has this extra wrist joint that the classic Lionel doesn't have, you can actually do a much, much better approximation of Lionel holding the sword over his head. If you wanted to do the two-handed grip with his other hand instead of with the claw sheath hand, you could. I just don't want to go swapping the parts out again. But yeah, this is a much closer approximation to the ho than classic Lionel is ever capable of doing. Which is actually very sad now that I think about it. It's mostly due to the fact that classic Lionel only has a single jointed elbow. Because it's really thanks to the double jointed elbow that classic Lionel is able to, that modern Lionel is able to pull off this pose so much more effectively. Again, toy marketed towards some adult collectors, but hopefully hoping to grab the kids. Better articulation and more solid construction, frankly, than a toy which was made much more towards adult collectors with almost no interest for kids. I really don't understand. It's like this guy had a massively slashed budget when they made him. Because even in terms of overall construction, although classic Lionel is significantly taller, he weighs much less. This is a much hollower feeling figure, which is just sad, really. However, the asking price back when this figure was brand new of about 20 bucks was just a bit too high for me at the time. The Kmart had a better price. It was closer to $16, and I really might have picked it up if I had more storage space in my house. At the price point of $6 at Liquidators, I really couldn't pass him up if I were to consider myself any kind of Thundercats fan. But I really think that this poor guy is really a much better figure than a lot of people gave him credit for, and he really did deserve. His entire franchise deserved a lot more than it actually got. So this is toy customizer Wakeangel2K1, who is also a very big Thundercats fan. And I am signing out.